Today, what we're going to be looking at is the flow tool and how you can create a flow that interacts with geometry dynamically, like what I'm demonstrating on the screen here. As I move this circle around, we can see that it has a relationship with the geometry on the page and is affecting it based on the properties that I've set within the flow. So if I drag this off the screen, we can see it sort of defaults to the low-rise residential based on those properties. And I've got my circle over here. So as I drag it across, the centroid is a commercial hub. Beyond that, we've got a medium residential zone, and beyond that, a low-rise residential on the outskirts. So very easy to drag around and move and make that assessment within your project. So we're going to talk through how we can actually build that out. And if I open up my flow editor to start with, and let's just select a geometry here. So something to note as well, that a flow is a property that can be applied to any giraffe geometry. So at the moment, all of this geometry has the flow property, quite a interesting name, called hippopotamus. It sort of generates by default, but has this property on the geometry. So if I click on any of these, we can see that this same flow is applied to all of them. I did have to do that and apply that en masse, so I had to select all of my shapes and apply that flow once I had built it out. So I've got my flow editor opened on the left-hand side, and if I actually open up my properties panel, we can see with this feature selected, we've actually got the flow property here, and I've got the correct flow selected from my drop-down list. It does, if I open up the flow editor, it does look quite overwhelming if you're not familiar to this landscape. But do note, it is just a copy. So we're only looking at sort of one piece here at the top. And then what I've done is just copy and paste that down 3 times. And the reason that I've done that 3 times is because we're writing 3 different features. So at the end, we've got the right feature function. And what we're doing is, because our area or our activity center, we've got a commercial center. So this is the first feature that's being written, is the commercial zone within the parameters defined. So if I zoom in here, I've got a greater than 0 and a less than 100. So within a 100-meter radius, we're applying the usage that is commercial and then repeating that process based on proximity to that centroid for this surrounding medium residential or residential usage that we have here. And that's between 101 to 220 meter radius. And finally, the single family usage is being applied from the 220 mark out to the 1,000 meter radius. And so what we might do is actually delete this bottom one here. So this is the single family residential usage. And if I just hold shift and drag over these features here, I'm just going to remove them. And then what I'm going to do is just sort of step through the process of building that out. So first of all, what we need is some inputs coming out of the closed point. So what we're going to select here is a greater than. So I've got a greater than node. And by adding nodes, all I'm doing is double clicking and then searching for it because I know what node I'm looking for. So I just search less than, grab that one, and we drop it into the map. You can also search down the bottom here as well. So if I click on sort of each of these tabs here, we can see that there's a number of functions and inputs. So I can drag them directly onto the screen. Just another way to drop those nodes into your flow. So the next thing we need is a number input. So I'm just going to double click, type number, and what I'm going to define here is the range. So we currently have 101 to 219 defined. So I'm going to jump in here and let's go 220 as my minimum. And I'm going to plug that into my B attribute in my greater than. The next step with my less than, I'm actually going to drag another point from my close point and plug that into the A. And then what we want is to enter, let's say, 1,000. So 1 kilometer is the maximum that we want to assess within this flow. And then I'm going to drag. So if you click on the node to drag out, when you drop that, it default sort of selects or prompts you to select the next node. So this one, I need the AND logic. So I can see it there. I'll grab that. And what we're going to do is connect this one up. So basically we're plugging both of these parameters into the AND. And then the next step is what we're asking is if this is true, which we will add a ternary if function, then we want it to apply this output. So if I drag this one across, let's add ternary if. So I'm going to add this one in. And then I need to write a feature basically. So if I drag this out, write features, grab this one. And so what we're doing here, it's nothing new. We're just basically replicating what we see above. I'm just sort of talking through the process so you can better understand what's happening here. So if it returns true, we need to apply an action. So I'm going to apply a usage. So apply usage. And the usage that we need is the single family residential. So if I drag the U out here and I want to get usage, so you'll notice that without this get usage node, there is a field. If I delete this one as well and we do apply usage once more. So there's a field here where I can manually type in the usage. However, there's a nice little shortcut if we drag that out like I did before and we want to get the usage. And this way we have a list of all of the usages available to us. So rather than typing in and searching, we can just quickly navigate to the single family, which is down here. Select that one from the list, and now it's plugged into my usage and applied that. I just need to connect this one back up to the A. We will add another property in there in a second, the right feature property. But for now, let's also plug the read feature. So we need to plug that into the apply usage. So now we have it populating on the map, because what we're doing is we're reading an original feature and we're writing the feature based on our rules that we've defined here. The additional property that I wanted to add in this flow is the right feature property, and that's just to define the number of levels that these usages will have. So I want the low rise or the single family residential to have a minimum of, or not a minimum, to have 3 floors. So I'm going to add a property, right feature property. I'm going to select that. Just going to make a little bit more room here, because what we're going to do is drag the F into the F and then the F into the A here. And we need to grab P, because what we want to do is get the property name. So get feature property name. And what we're looking for here is levels. So it's the levels attribute that we're wanting to bring forward. And then we just need to assign a number to that, or a value. So we're looking for levels. Can just type and search. Going to grab levels. You'll notice it's flattened out because we haven't defined that number yet. So we need to go to the V, pull that out. And you can also hover over these as well. So V for value, P for property, and it'll give you an indication of what you need to plug in there. So let me just drag out V once more. And I need a number value here. So number of levels is what I'm looking to define. And I'm just going to add 3 here. And so now I can see that that's 3 levels, which is what I'm looking for. Perfect. Okay, so that's all. We've added that single family flow back in, which looks to be working. And we can grab the centroid and drag that around just to make sure. And that looks all correct. And the last item, which is quite an important step as well, is within this flow, what we're doing is actually referencing a feature. So the feature is this center or this centroid that I've got over here. And that's what enables us to basically apply these rules to on the interaction between these two geometries. So, however, if I were to grab the reference point and drag this further away, once it starts to fall without those defined parameters that I've set in the flow editor, the polygons actually disappear. So what I want to happen is I still want to keep the original polygon feature there, even though it may not be in range and affected by my flow that I've created. So we're going to jump back into the flow editor here, and we're going to make some slight adjustments here. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add some extra steps here at the end of the flow in order to generate those polygons when they're not affected by the rules that I've defined earlier on in the flow. So I'm going to first double click and grab the identity node. And this just helps me with routing. So I'm going to plug all of them into this one here. And remember, hold shift to drag multiple strings into the node. And I'm just going to delete these ones here. So we'll see the geometry disappear because it's no longer writing any features. And we'll bring that back shortly. Okay, and the next step is I want to add a filter. So if I'm going to double click, I'm going to grab my filter, type in filter, and I've got this here. I'm going to add another identity just to help with the routing here. And I'm just going to loop it back into itself like so. And I'm going to join the identity to this filter here. So in order to understand what's happening here, I need to add an inspector. So if I double click and I type inspector, this allows me to look at basically the code that's being generated from each of these nodes. And if I turn on the evaluated mode, these sunglasses up the top here, that allows us to look into the node. So if I drag this and connect it to identity, and what we're looking at here, if I just collapse this feature here, we've got multiple features. So we've got this feature here, and then we also have two null values. So this is correct. However, we're getting all of this information at once when we only really want one of these conditions. So that's where the filter comes in. And if I now plug this inspector into my filter, and now we collapse number 2, we can see that those two nulls have now been removed, and we're only filtering for that feature. So I'm just going to remove the inspector, delete that, because the next step is we need to add an if function, so a ternary if. So I'm going to double click, ternary if, and I'm going to grab this one here. We'll make a little bit more room. And what I want to do is I want to apply some conditions. So if it's true, I need the filter to join into the A here. But if it's false, this is what we've been wanting to do. I want to read the original feature. So this is going right back to the start. So our original feature, which was the polygons I created at the very start, a bit of prep work before I got into this video. And if I drag that out, and we need to connect it all the way to this one here. So when none of the flows, this one, this, and this one, are applicable to the geometry, I want it to return to the default value. That's what's happening here. I do need to add one more step, and that's out of the filter to add a list length. So I'm just going to grab list length, and I want to plug that into the C as well, which is going to help with that filtering. And the last step, we just need to write this feature. So I'm going to drag the ternary if into my write feature. And we've got all of the geometry back. And what I can check now is if I grab this node here, which was my reference feature, and I start to move it outside of the range that I defined in my flow, I can see that they've all reverted back to the base geometry. And let's actually, with this reference feature that I have, I just want to add a little bit of a style to it so I can see and maneuver it a little bit better within the project. So I'm going to bring this panel out, make sure that's selected, and I'm just going to add some properties. So selecting that feature, we're going to add an offset, collapse this one for now, and let's define the offset. So this is how big the radius of the circle, and let's just say 200. It's a good catchment. And then I'm also going to add a color and opacity, and let's make this red and drop that down to 0.3. So now we've got a much more defined reference point that I can drag around and easily locate if I need to maneuver it. And now if we delete this feature, all of it reverts back to the original read feature, which was that base polygon.